in 1906 in Baltimore to a well-to-do family, Virginia Hall enjoyed an adventure-filled childhood that prepared her well for her experiences in Europe. With her brother John, she spent summers at Boxhorn, the family farm, riding horses, sailing the Chesapeake, and as a teen, hiking and fishing. She attended the all-girls Roland Park Country Day School, where the tall, athletic Hall excelled at sports and acted in school plays. In Hall's yearbook, a poem about her reads, "Virginia's passion for adventure has become proverbial among her mates." Her classmates already sensed what many are now understanding. Virginia Hall was about to leave her mark on the world. While those same classmates were planning marriage and families, Hall was dreaming of travel and adventure. After attending Radcliffe and Barnard colleges, she studied in Europe for several years before pursuing a career as a clerk in the American Embassy in Warsaw. Soon, however, the first of many barriers presented itself. While hunting snipe and turkey, Hall accidentally shot herself in her lower left leg. She was rushed to a hospital where her left leg had to be amputated below the knee. Her leg was replaced by a wooden prosthetic she named Cuthbert. An obstacle for most? Yes, but not for Hall. Unfulfilled by her desk work at the Venice consulate, Hall applied to the Foreign Service. The State Department rejected Hall's request because amputation of any portion of a limb, except fingers or toes, or resection of a joint was a cause for rejection. Or so the State Department claimed, since women accounted for only 6 of the 1,500 U.S. diplomats at the time. Hall's gender most likely also worked against her. Undeterred by yet another barrier, Hall worked for an ambulance service in France and as a co-clerk for the U.S. military attaché in the London Embassy. In June 1940, a new volunteer force, the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, was created to wage a secret war against the Nazis. They had a powerful supporter in Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who famously ordered them to set Europe ablaze. Hall took the call to arms seriously and in 1941 was recruited and trained by the SOE in clandestine tradecraft, communications, weapons, and other resistance activities. She was sent to France with a fake French ID as Marcel Montaigne, while her associates called her by the code name Diane. Hall spent 13 months in France, maintaining contact with the French underground in Paris, assisting escaped prisoners of war and downed airmen, finding drop zones for weapons and money, and recruiting French men and women of the resistance to set up safe houses and store arms caches. As the first woman to be given the role of field officer for the SOE, Hall broke through the barriers of gender and war. Hall, a naturally gifted spy, worked discreetly undercover as a New York Post reporter. However, she quickly appeared on the radar of the occupying Germans, who dubbed her the Limping Lady. The Gestapo's Klaus Barbie, the infamous Butcher of Lyon, ordered wanted posters of Hall that featured a drawing of her above the words, "The enemy's most dangerous spy. We must find and destroy her." The constant need to reinvent herself presented both mental and physical barriers for Hall. She knew that if she were captured, she could end up in Ravensbrück, be poisoned, or be shot. After all, of the 40 women sent to France by the SOE, 15 never returned, and Hall didn't want to be one of them. By 1942, Germany had seized all of France, and Hall needed to flee or be caught. She barely escaped Lyon by train, but then had to cross the snowy Pyrenees by foot to make it into Spain.
The mental barrier is that one of the reasons why it was very difficult for her is because she left agents behind. She also was worried about going over the Pyrenees because she knew it was going to be an arduous journey. She had a prosthetic left leg that was going to be bothersome for her. The other mental challenge of not knowing who's behind you or not knowing who's ahead of you that could, in fact, find you and turn you over to the authorities.
Without a mission to complete, Hall quickly got bored in Spain. "I'm living pleasantly and wasting time," she said. "It isn't worthwhile, and after all, my neck is my own. If I am willing to get a crick in it, I think that's my prerogative." With the SOE reluctant to send Hall back to France for fear that she'd be caught, Hall's spy career took yet another turn. Undaunted, she joined the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, and requested to be sent back into France to continue her work as a spy.
People would have a flashlight, and when the plane was coming down, getting close, it would send a message, and then Virginia would send the message back.
Part of Hall's mission was to build a network of agents in South France. This time, she disguised herself as an elderly milkmaid, dyeing her hair gray and hiding her prosthetic with thick skirts and an old lady's hobble. In this case, for Hall, her prosthetic worked to her advantage, making her old lady disguise more believable. Hall and her network included some 1,500 agents, including a French-American soldier named Paul Goylot, whom she later married. This powerful network played a key role in the D-Day invasions. Hall's network destroyed 4 bridges, derailed freight trains, and severed phone lines, thereby cutting off Nazi reinforcements and preventing the Germans from retreating. Due in part to her network's efforts, Hall was instrumental in securing the Allies' victory. For her courage and ingenuity during the war, Hall was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the only civilian woman to be so honored. Wild Bill Donovan, the head of the OSS, presented it to her in a quiet ceremony attended only by Hall and her mother. The citation reads in part, "Working in a region with enemy troops and constantly hunted by the Gestapo, with utter disregard for her safety and continually at the risk of capture, torture, and death, Hall directed the resistance forces with extraordinary success in acts of sabotage and guerrilla warfare against enemy troops, installations, and communications." World War II ended on September 2, 1945, and Hall moved back to Maryland with her family, where she faced barriers of another kind. Eager to remain in the intelligence business, Hall joined the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. But going back to civilian life after living in constant fear and being on the move in Europe presented its challenges. Instead of being able to run assets after the war, Hall had to write papers for potential agents who would run assets themselves. Her skills were outdated, her natural aggressiveness annoyed her younger male superiors, and once again, she faced barriers because she was a woman. In fact, gender discrimination at the CIA was so rampant that in the 1950s, a group of CIA women famously called the Petticoat Panel was formed to examine the pay and rank disparities between male and female employees. When it was published, the report contained Hall's fitness report. In it, she was given 1s, 2s, and 3s out of a possible 5 for her performance between January and June 1956. Furious about her low ratings, Hall responded, "The low rating of 3 is unjustified. I question the allegation that I was neither interested nor experienced. I was and am intensely interested in the field of political action and have had considerable experience in it even before coming to the agency." The CIA's efforts to eliminate gender discrimination made little impact on her career, and Hall remained doing desk work until her mandatory retirement at age 60. She then moved back onto her family farm in Barnesville, Maryland, where she raised French poodles and enjoyed making French cheese with her husband. Hall died on July 12, 1982, at the age of 76, and is buried beneath this modest tombstone at Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland. Hall would be pleased to know that her legacy lives on, that today 3 of the top figures in the CIA are women, that a CIA training center is named after her, and that both the CIA Museum and the International Spy Museum tell her story, not to place her on a pedestal, because that's not what she'd want, but to show that with a sense of adventure, a dose of courage, and loyalty to a cause, that barriers can be broken, and that even a limping lady from Baltimore can leave her mark on the world.